My hope today is to change the way you view plank pose forever. In actual fact, I secretly want you to think of me every time you get into plank. And honestly, I even don't mind my name to be associated with any profanity that comes to mind when you're in challenging positions. So bear with me for a minute, because sometimes I sound random, and this is definitely going to sound very random. Hopefully it'll make sense toward the end. There's very few things I remember from school, thanks to conventional education, and do not tell my kids. But I do remember some things I studied in English literature class, which was my favorite class. There's a poem by the English poet Rudyard Kipling called If, and there's a line in the poem that says, "If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs." This plays in the head I'm trying to keep up when I am in another random situation, plank pose. This very simple, basic pose is not glamorous or sexy in any way. And that's probably the reason why you don't see very many people posting pictures of themselves in plank on Instagram, except, of course, for yours truly. So he's real, and this is a true story, and he's really heavy. So you're expected, the pose is you're basically trying to keep your body in a straight line, distributing your weight evenly between the hands and the balls of the feet. Technically speaking, it should be easier than standing up on your 2 feet, because you have a couple of extra limbs to carry you. But for anyone who has tried this, we know that this is far from the reality. This is a very complex pose. This is a challenging and very revealing pose. It also happens to be very enlightening. This is a pose that is great practice for standing up on your 2 feet and holding up the planet. I consider myself a casual athlete. I believe an athlete is a frame of mind that puts one in a space of self-challenge. You're continuously pushing the limits, testing, pushing. And this process is never ending, because the limits keep moving as we move with them. In fact, it's this very dynamism that makes us uniquely human. We're pushing, always pushing the comfort zone and then beyond the comfort zone. What is special about this is that there's always wins. There's always little victories every day that keep the dopamine flowing and us showing up the next day. And these wins are not only physical, because we're not only our gross bodies. I remember, I think it was on day 2097 of plank training, and there's so many more, when I absorbed every single cue my trainer was giving me. I had been given those same cues for what felt like a decade, but something shifted that day. For the first time in my life, as I neared my edge, struggling to keep my head and body up, my mind, of course, in endless chatter, there was a lot of profanity, 100%. I experienced for a moment or two this sense of peace, space, and effortlessness. Yes, there were angels and hallelujahs, and then Kipling's poem, in that order. I felt like my body was aligning itself for the first time in my life. And breath was flowing without interruptions, also for the first time in my life. It felt as if I was being held up by two opposing forces. My heels anchored in the past, the crown of my head flirting with the future, as my body in between basked in the stillness of the present. For the first time as well, I experienced this clarity of mind that I had only read about in books. I saw my heels at the starting line of life's marathon. So many known and unknown faces cheering. Blessings I had no conscious role in inviting into my life. I saw Daddy's girl, curled up in my father's abaya, having my bedtime feed, nourished and bathed in unconditional love. That past my heels were anchored in was an extraordinary past that was lived in an ordinary existence, much like the plank. A modest upbringing that I know today taught me resilience and grit. You see, my launching pad was extraordinary in every way. I doubt 46 years ago anyone can say that they grew up, even in the most advanced society in the world, they can say that they grew up in a household of a stay-at-home father and a genius, hardworking mother. In a very small two-bedroom apartment in Waibde in Amman, Jordan. An ordinary Arab girl with an extraordinary Muslim name was brought up by her military daddy, an oxymoron in so many ways. He made my breakfast. He made my lunchbox for school. He waited for me to come home from school and help me with homework. He made rice for lunch and peeled oranges for dessert. The smell of oranges still reminds me of him. And it was this 11-year-old girl who woke up one morning, went up to her father, and asked him to teach her to pray because she felt like this inside. I have prayed every day since, 5 times a day, even when life seemed to be constantly testing my faith and discipline. I learned recently that that's how habits are formed. Those stolen moments I took in prayer were my physical and spiritual boot camp. So this extraordinary, ordinary past brought me to the starting line, powered not by superfoods, brought me to the starting line, of course, with discipline and faith. I mentioned that before. Powered not by superfoods and supplements, but by unconditional love. So there I held my head in plank, breath flowing playfully through my body. It took decades for the path to clear, and it's still clearing. It involved and continues to involve so much work and so many mistakes I can't even begin to tell you. But discipline always helps me get up. The thing is, mid-race is not very glamorous. There's no one watching. You're on your own. There's nowhere cheering or clapping. But the power is in that stretch. This is where power resides. A great phenomenal upbringing is a great head start. I know, and I share mine with you only to illustrate that we're all extraordinary in ordinary ways. Sometimes we need to change the lenses through which we view our lives. Even in adversity, there's always an opportunity to learn, to grow, to heal. It's up to us. But it's mid-race where the magic is. It's on this stretch that I recognize it is up to me to cultivate the ingredients I need in order to create space in my body so energy can flow. Once energy flows through the body is supported to function in its default condition, the state we call well-being. Flexibility, mobility, and strength are the 3 ingredients for well-being in the body, physically, mentally, and spiritually. This is balance. I'm afraid we get this balance confused with a balance of another kind that sometimes involves us justifying our questionable choices with numbing techniques, maybe, of resorting to all sorts of food, pharmaceuticals, and vows to never sin again until we do. Does that sound familiar? Occasionally, if we're lucky, like I was in Planck 2097, one experiences the magic of alignment, when you can hold your head forever. The consciousness is awakened to the realization that, in fact, it is up to us, every choice we make, to create the space for energy to flow so that the body is supported to function as it is meant to support. When I can hold my head, I help my neighbor hold up hers. When the food I choose to put in my mouth nourishes me, it nourishes the earth and all her inhabitants. When energy flows through my body, it flows through the rest of the world. When I stay up, everyone stays up. And let me tell you how. When you are in alignment, you come to the realization that there are so many forces holding you up beyond the past and the future. These strings are attached to the rest of the world. This reminds me of another quote in English literature class that says, when one tugs at a single thing in nature, he finds it attached to the rest of the world. Yes, I promise you, all this was going through my mind as I experienced grace in plank number 2097. Compassionate living is the choice that recognizes we are, in fact, held up by strings attached to the earth and all her inhabitants. These strings thrive on our physical, mental, and spiritual balance. Every breath, every word, every thought, every action, every food we take in feeds those connections. When I win, everyone wins. Plank can be anything. It can be a walk. It can be a run. It can be a swim. It can be as a warrior 3 in yoga, or it can even be an Everest ascent. And yes, it is physical. We need to get into the physical body in order for us to clear any obstruction so that energy can flow through the body. It takes discipline. It takes faith. It takes grit. Embodied in very small, ordinary choices we take every day, most definitely when no one is watching. And one seemingly ordinary day, as you hold your head, you start exuding this power so that you lift the person next to you, and then you take it into the world. The power is in the present moment. Right now, every choice you make will create this reality, will shape your future, and can heal your past. Rudyard Kipling was telling his son, if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, ... you are a man, my son. I am here to tell every man and woman who will hear me. When you keep your head, you help the earth and all her inhabitants keep theirs. When you brighten your light, you light up the world. Thank you.